This video is in response to a question coming from Nesbit Piri, and the question goes like, where does our interest in music from other countries come from? Okay, yeah. This question is best answered by referring back to history. Like I always say, history informs the present. I think if you look at our history, every period of time there's a genre from other countries that is very dominant. In fact, it's a hierarchy. On number one, there's a dominant genre from other countries. Then on number two, usually there's another dominant genre again from another country that is a bit subservient to the one on number one. And then at the bottom of the list is always our own music, and that is very much answered by looking at our history. So I'm going to look at our history from the 1930s, when our music industry in Zimbabwe started, when urbanization started. And my main sources of information are these two books. The first one is Zimbabwe Township Music by Joyce Genji Makwenda, and the second one is African Music Power and Being in Colonial Zimbabwe by Professor Mozichikowero. Of course, I used other sources as well as material that I learned when I was at College of Music and when I did my musicology degree with MSU. Urbanization in Zimbabwe started in the 1930s. There were townships that were built in Harare and Bulawayo. So people were coming from as far as Malawi, Masvingo, all around Zimbabwe. They were all coming and settling in Mbare, and some were settling in Bulawayo. That time there were no radios. So what they used to do is during weekends they would meet and entertain each other. Each group would present their own cultural music. Everybody was very proud of their culture. So people from Malawi would demonstrate their cultural dances from Malawi. People from Masvingo will present their Mande dances. People from Mure will present their Mbende dances. Mbende is what we later called Jerusalem, because vaitira kutiza mapurisa because yanga singabvumidzwe saka wakangoiti Jerusalem kuti vaitonga vari kuenda kunoita zvinhu zvechechi. So as time went on, the government installed loudspeakers all around the townships. So the purposes of these loudspeakers was to disseminate information. Whatever information they wanted to give to the people, they would pass it through those loudspeakers that were planted all around Mbare. Mbare is the township that people in Harare used to live. All the black people used to live in Mbare. So what then they later did was to play music in between those announcements. And the music they played was American music. When people started listening to this music, they started calling it civilized music, music ichurungu, and everybody wanted to identify with this music. So it's sort of like put a picture of an attitude against our own African music, because this was considered civilized music. As time went on, everybody wanted to identify with that music, everybody wanted to copy that music. So starting in 1930, the music that was played a lot on those loudspeakers was jazz music coming from America. As a result, we started having a lot of jazz bands in Zimbabwe, and they were copying what they were hearing on those loudspeakers. So the role and importance of our own local music was subdued, because everybody wanted to identify with the civilized music. So one of the first bands to come out of that period of time was the Bantu Actors, which was led by a couple, Laina Mataka and Kenneth Mataka. They were a couple, both of them were musicians, and the Bantu Actors was one of the very first bands to be formed in Zimbabwe. And it is from that band that we got artists like Sani Sondo and Safiro Mazikatire. The dominant genre was jazz, Then the other genre that was less dominant was country music, and one of the biggest influences in that genre was an American artist called Jimmie Rodgers. And it is from that country influence that we started having what we later called Omasganda musicians, artists like Josiah Hadebe, Sabelo Mate, Jacob Mungu, John White. They all came from that movement where they were sort of like emulating country music. But the good thing about that is they sort of Zimbabweanized the genre until it ended up with a different name. So in 1933, the Swain Broadcasting started in Zimbabwe with the Southern Rhodesian Broadcasting Corporation. And its purposes was to provide entertainment for countries like Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And again, most of the music they played was American music. So in psychology, there is what they call the mere exposure effect. And it says what you're exposed to a lot is what you end up liking. For example, if you listen to a certain genre of music over and over and over again, something happens psychologically. So that's how our people begin to be westernized in terms of their music taste. So as the Bantu Actors was being formed in Harare, in Bulawayo another group was being formed as well. It was called the Merrymakers, and it was led by Remington Mazabane. This period was marked by a lot of big band jazz music which was played on radio. Like I said before, broadcasting started in 1933. The biggest influences that time were artists like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and other American jazz artists. The groups had a lot of band members. So in Zimbabwe we started having groups that were copying that as well. One of the most popular groups that time from Zimbabwe was a group known as D. Blake Evening Follies. According to Moses, one of the band members, the group was started on the 10th of September 1943, and at one time they had 25 band members. Because they were copying what they saw from American artists. At that time, the government also used to provide entertainment, sort of like Mafirim Swines, my bioscope that time, where they would broadcast comedians like Tiki, funny comedian named Tiki. So, and on top of that, they would also play some videos of American musicians, and that's where our people used to watch. Those American artists. That time it was expensive to own a TV, so wanongosnama TV. So everything that they saw it from those bioscope and the music they listened to from the loudspeakers. One of the most influential artists from that time is August Msarurwa. He was part of the Cold Storage Band and part of the Police Band as well. He released his song Skokiana in 1951, and that song was very big. That time it was covered by more than 50 artists, and the artists include Yuma Sekela and Jimmy Hluzu, who covered it. My manjapa 2000 kuno, and he was one of the very influential artists of the time who was influenced by American jazz. Even Louis Armstrong did a cover of his song Skokian. Again, another group is Epworth Theatrical Stratas. When I was celebrating my graduation, I did a jam session with them where I played my own instruments on top of their song. If you still remember that one, I'll just show a snippet of it. That time was marked by a move from the big band era to the quartets, to the trios. I mean, they were just trimming their bands to small numbers. And again, it was influenced by what they saw from the bioscopes, what was happening in the USA. One of the most popular groups that time was the City Quads, which was formed by Sunny Sondo. Sunny Sondo was part of the D Black Evening Folly, so he broke away and formed his own quartet, which was the City Quads. In fact, Sunny Sondo is one artist ukabvunza vese madhara venguva yavanokuzva kuti Sunny Sondo was the best, and in fact vanototaura kuti hakuna muZimbabwe munhu akamboperforma kaunti many vamwe vacho vanotofunga kuti hakuna munhu achaperforma fora Sunny Sondo. But anyway, the problem is we don't have much documentation of his performances, so it's difficult to judge. No, so every generation inongoni munhu waye wanetu ndiyanga akapenga. But anyway, so there were groups like the City Quads, the Cool Four, and artists like Dorothy Masuka, and other artists with smaller groups. So that time those were fire nguva was very coppers from bicycle. Something happened in the 1960s. The group City Quads, which was led by Sonny Sondo, it was the first group to record an album, and the album was called Music in the African Township. But what happened is, on this album they included a lot of political messages, and this did not go down well with the government. The album was banned. There was a push by the government to sort of restrict music from Zimbabwe, because they were afraid kuti panomo achangoimba futi nozadona kwasinganzwi kushona kam sometimes vanogona kuzozvibata later kuti pana vanhu vari kutotituka panapa. So they started promoting a lot of music from South Africa, because in South Africa the government there was an apartheid government, so most of the music coming from South Africa was not political. So they started promoting a lot of music from South Africa, and some music again from DRC, as well as music from the Western world. So there was so much music from countries like South Africa at that time. There was so much foreign music to the extent that they even stopped recording. Discourage pese pamunongoningirira panongotera paredhiyo parongorera music dzekunze nyange mukaita dzenyanzi kumbonzi. From the 70s, rock music was now the in thing. Ndo yanga yakurira, ndo yanga yakunzi, ndo zvako mazwano. Noza zvatinongera mazwano kuti music yakadhiriko mazwano, music yakadhiriko mazwano. And as I always say, pese panonzi music yamazwano, it's always foreign music. So music yanga yakufire that time, yanga yakupisa was rock music. And the popular groups that were dominant that time were the Rolling Stones, Vana Mickey Jagger, Vana Keith Richards, the Beatles, Vana Paul McCartney, Vana Ringo Starr, Vana John Lennon, and other groups as well, Vana Jimi Hendrix and so forth. By that time, a number of people now had radios in Zimbabwe. The radios were promoting rock music. It was just rock music, rock music, rock music, rock music. And rock music was also an advantage to the government that time, because they just played rock music which had non-political messages. So as a result, like I said before, radio. Power. It's exactly zvamunopesera makuda. Even ukataura nemadhara ese vakakura that time, vese vanongouza kuti rock music ndo yakapenga, rock music ndo yabhozi, ndo yavaingopiwa that time, ndo yanga the dominant genre from the 70s. So as a result, we started having our own rock bands in Zimbabwe. We had bands like Eye of Liberty, we had bands like Dr. Foot Switch, we had guitarists like Mokoomba. I don't know t-shirt against Jimi Hendrix is dead, but Mokoomba is alive. He was a rock guitarist, rock yakapenga. And we even had rock festivals in Zimbabwe. And rock music was very big. In Bulawayo, we had a group called Wells Fargo. Vanamdara Neva Mpofu, Vanamdara Eba Chitambo, from Bulawayo. And they were very huge that time. And some of them recorded their music, and they used to command huge followings. And even most of our local acts started off as rock musicians. The likes of Thomas Mfumo, Oliver Mtukudzi, James Chimombe, Marshall Munumume, they all started as rock musicians. But what they did is, imagine, 1975, I think somewhere from 1975, that's when they started deciding, you know what, I think we need to sound like ourselves. we need to stop copying Americans. And according to this book by Joyce Makwenda, Tutankhamen Band was the first group in Zimbabwe to record mbira music on guitars. Kanaitwa na Mkanya, we call it Chimurenga. Kanaitwa na Mtukudzi, we call it Katekwe. It's a sub-genres in mbira music. The first group to do that type of music was Tutankhamen Band. And the song got very popular. They were contracted to play at a venue here in Harare, and they were very much discouraged by the venue owners. By what is very venue, no, you must stop doing that African type of music. Because I see they fire these days. These days, fire, it's rock music. So they were forced to quit playing mbira music, and they went back to playing rock music and playing American covers, and they changed their name to New Tutankhamen Band. But the good thing is, recording Yahweh influence or mama artists, and other artists started following suit. But my Chinese mind is, if you are doing Zimbabwean music like mbira, you were considered to be backward. Music for the unsophisticated, music for the uneducated. If you follow our history, you notice that people who love or who follow foreign music are always considered to be the sophisticated ones. It's just the same as people who are good at speaking English and wasinachi accent, fanga language. Wanongwa accent zekwa American zeku UK and wanonzi ndo the sophisticated ones. So that stigma, do you know anzitauti vanhu vapedzera vangoda foreign music more for local music? If you study the history of colonization around the world, you notice that it causes people to sort of like self-hate and also admire the people who colonized them. If you read this book, I mentioned it earlier, it mentions how the colonial government deliberately made an effort to create what they called a new African. That is, an African who is detached from his culture, an African who is more Europeanized. As a result of that, you notice that we have got a lot of people who are proud that they cannot speak Shona, who are proud that their children cannot speak Shona, who are proud that they know nothing about their culture, who are proud that they don't listen to any music from their country. And it's the same type of people who feel that anything local is not sophisticated enough. You have to know everything, what's happening in Hollywood, everything that's happening in other countries, but knowing nothing about your culture and what's happening in your country. The first missionaries who preached in Zimbabwe, they preached against our own African music. For example, the mbira was banned. And at one time the ngoma was also banned, the drum, but later on it was accepted in church. But up to now, most churches, they do not want to have anything to do with the mbira. So as a result of this campaign, we started comparing ourselves negatively against Europeans, and we took it further and started comparing ourselves negatively against other Africans. During that time is when freedom fighters coming from Mozambique, Tanzania, started bringing in Banga music. Banga music is what we later called Kanindo. If you look at my previous videos, I did a full video essay on Banga music, what we later called Kanindo and what we later called Sungura music. So I won't dwell much on that. So Banga music was introduced to Zimbabwe, and we adapted it and Zimbabweanized it, but still it was also regarded as backward music, because everybody was wanted to identify with either Western music or South African music. Because we pushed kuma 1960s. Like I said before, usually there is a dominant foreign genre, and then there are some subservient foreign genres. Another dominant foreign genre was cha-cha-cha, which was coming from DRC. And we ended up with some local cha-cha-cha groups, like the Great Sounds. If you remember the song Vanupenga Vanuwaya. We also had Kwela music, which was coming from South Africa. It was popular with artists like Spokesmashian and Kid Marong. And we also had Smanje Manje, which was also coming from South Africa. You know, people like Mahlatini and the Mahotela Queens in South Africa. And in Zimbabwe, we also started having our own Smanje Manje groups like the Jairus Jiri Band and other groups. But Banga was also big again. You know, the type of music that's played by the Soul Brothers. Again, it was coming from South Africa. But the dominant genre in the 1970s was rock and roll music coming from America. In 1980, Bob Marley came to perform in Zimbabwe to celebrate Zimbabwe's Independence Day. Because of that gesture, reggae music became very huge in Zimbabwe. And so from 1980 onwards, our radio stations were dominated by reggae music. Any group that used to perform that time, no matter you were a Sungura band, you were a Rumba band, you were a Mbira band, it was an unwritten law that you had to have a segment on your program where you would play reggae music. Otherwise, my totemane wano kunzi iband rekupirisingaridze reggae on. So you notice that all groups used to have a reggae artist. For example, Thomas Mapfumo had Tobias Ariketa, Kiama Boys had System Tazwida. Yes, System Tazwida started off as a reggae artist with Kiama Boys. And Tobias Ariketa later moved on to Safiro Mazikatre's band, and he used to have the same role of doing reggae covers. And the most popular song that time was the song Funny Feeling by Dennis Brown. And it was an unwritten law that every band had to play Funny Feeling Pama shows, but otherwise so reggae music became very dominant. And some of the most influential groups from Jamaica and UK were artists like Bob Marley and the Wailers, Missing Roots, Dennis Brown, Don Carlos, Zimbabwe Dread. Yeah, there were so many groups. And then in Zimbabwe, we also started having our own reggae groups like Nastafara and Transit Crew. Transit Crew was very influential as well. It was started by Munya Brown. He was from the group Missing Roots. He came to Zimbabwe with the group Missing Roots, fell in love with our country, settled here, married our sister, and formed Transit Crew. And Transit Crew was very huge. Up to now, it's still around. So the 1980s up to the mid-90s, reggae music was dominant in Zimbabwe. From around 93, 94, somewhere there, Rumba became the dominant foreign genre in Zimbabwe. And artists like Kanda Bongo Man, Kofolomide, Pepe Kale, Loketo, and all these artists, they became very huge in Zimbabwe. And every party you went, Rumba. Every kombi wakwira, Rumba. And all the bands started to have macavers, Rumba. And we also started having our own Zimbabwean bands. And some of them were very local musicians, but they pretended to come from DRC. And I even played with some Rumba bands as well. Especially in 1994, I played with one called Marakashi and the one called Kwasa Kwasa Kings. They had musicians from Zimbabwe and other musicians from DRC. Because when DRC musicians came to play in Zimbabwe, some of them stayed behind, married our sisters, and started bands here. So some Zimbabweans Rumba. That's why I also learned how to play Rumba. So mid-90s, Rumba was the in thing in Zimbabwe. And we also started having our own Rumba groups here in Zimbabwe. Artists like Peter Tangwena, John Ali, and who else? There's a lot of a big number of artists. Because Rumba yakambo fire. It was just Rumba on Yakanetsam Zimbabwe. But one thing that I have to point out, which is very funny and weird, is every time panonetsa a foreign type of music in Zimbabwe. Those people who love that foreign genre, they don't mind parting with any amount of money pakauya that foreign artist to perform in Zimbabwe. When pakauya my foreign artists vanoridza music iyoyo, the way they support my foreign artists is totally different from the way they support Muno Zimbabwe vanoridza that type of music. I don't know if you know what I'm saying, because we had a number of rumba bands in Zimbabwe. I even played for 2 and takaita maflop anoshamisa takarowa nenzara vasingaiti, but paiti pakauya vekunze vakaswaridza vaitora mari yese, but vemuno mukaita ini mashows paingouya kuti vanhu shoma mukarelisa vanhu vaingoningirino zvansina, the impact was different, because every time ndaona kuti vanhu kana vachifarira eforeign genre soko vanonyonsapota vanhu vanonga vachichiita vachibva kunyika iyoyo. But in Zimbabwe akazonyanyofayiwo zvake with that genre with rumba is Papa Jose pakaita that song inonzi ndochea. Yeah, that one yakambofaya yakanetsa. Then year 2000 there was a shift. I remember that time pakaiswa airplay quota laws by the government with local music stereo. And by the way, before I go any further, those laws are found worldwide. I know those laws are found worldwide in all the countries around the world. Music yemunyika dzavo inomedzwa nedzimwe music dzekune nyika, because zvinongoza zvinongoitika kuti pane dzimwe nyika dzakaita kunge dzedu dzekuti even radio DJs they feel cool kana achiridza music yekunze kwenyika anobva afila kunge ndiye akapenga strike kuti ari kuridza zvinhu zvekunze kwenyika aridze zvemuno sophisticated enough. So that problem happened worldwide. Even to Canada, the government had to sponsor my artists could wear good good producers so that one would such good quality. Because my radio stations were music in Canada it's not good enough quality yakawanda. Those are two the government have to put some mad but what I am my recordings at a sponsor so chirizai one, but still pango Buddha for my excuses with no pan problem but still when the night dango Buddha and my airplay quota laws they are not just found in Zimbabwe. I know some in Zimbabwe that these days they are not being implemented right now. My radio stations they are going busy with the piano Nigeria, but year 2000 because the government was very strict on them. In that time music pisa was R&B, but the good thing is we had our own local R&B which was later called urban grooves. And from the year 2000s, ndo yakambo pisa muno Zimbabwe, urban grooves yakambo pisa. So for the simple reason yekuti ndo yanga pushwa sterek pa radio, yakabva yatanga kudiwa sterek muno Zimbabwe. Like I said before, pane knows the mere exposure effect ku psychology. Yekuti zvamunonyunyupiwa ndo zvamunogamuchira. And one thing I really appreciated that time is we started having our own celebrities which dig. Because all along tichikura isusu kwakusina muZimbabwean youth aita celebrity muZimbabwe, but zvakatangira pama urban grooves vanhu vakutanga kufariro vanhu vaipisa at that time. I even participated a lot. I remember I played Kazeze with Mafrik, and one thing I liked about Mafrik mbingwani chimwe fusion changa kuita so chekusanganisa Zimbabwean music and R&B, but I don't know why they abandoned it. Because Pepe wanga kutoa imwe kona ingakatopenga, but vakazongoi abandon. Anyway, that's a story for another day. From around the year 2012-2013, another movement came, and that was the Zim dancehall movement. Ndopa yakatanga kufaya. Not kuti yakatanga 2013, no. Kumashuru kuwanga watombotanga wana major E, wana potato, wana chichichi, wanga wachimbo ningirina, but it was not as big as it became around kunana 2013. So from 2013, Chanyo Fire was dancehall. In the up to now, dancehall is still Ichuru Fire. I think I don't know yapera in opera is still firing. And with a lot of artists who are Chataura Bozi, you know them Bozi do Ichuru Pisa much. Currently, I'm doing this video at the end of 2022. Music Zurgu fired Zekunze right now. Pane amapiano in South Africa, Afrobeats in Nigeria, dancehall in Jamaica. In fact, those three are fire. But the reason why I did this video was to reply to this question, the fascination you do over copying foreign music. And Zimbabwe to reach the radio, especially these days, you have to sound foreign. But at the same time, international, you can't go any foreign music here. Because and the Zimbabwe, our population is very small, our economy is bad. Music which is very, very difficult. But you can manage to tour around the world, you make a good living. So my part is an artist man, you want to set your priorities right. Data music you know trend in Zimbabwe chete can data music you ndo kwanza kujika kunze. But at the same time pane fight here kuti parade udahurirawo. But we've got the majority of our radio stations in Zimbabwe were push artists who sound foreign, artists who sound either Nigerian, South African, or Jamaican. Don't you push was radio or American one on a trip. Then when we chita the much they are not getting much airplay. But at the same time, we can apply for my festivals. When you can one goes to put out to sound like Zukumsha Queen. So right now, find that confusion. For the jam session today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish out a performance that I did with Tende Mavengeni, a very young Mbira artist. We did a very traditional song called Todzungaira. This was our own version with Tendai. So it's a very ancient song. So here we go.
Zimbabwe akauya nehondo akomana, ihondo asikana. Shaminuka wakauraiwa nehondo akomana, nehondo asikana. Nehanda wakauraiwa nehondo asikana, ndokuuraiwa nehondo asikana, ihondo. Mudzimu oye, tatsungaira mambo. Tatsungaira mambo we.